Welcome to Talk to Brazil with Tom Reaoch, the business connector to business in Brazil. Welcome to Talk to Brazil, the business connection, the world's first English language internet radio program about business in Brazil since 2009 and now in podcast format. I'm Tom Reaoch, an American living in Brazil for many years and known as the King of Networking, and talking from my podcast studio in Campinas, São Paulo, Brazil. Today's guest with us again is Alex Foessel, and we talked last April, and today he joins us again, but today from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Alex Foessel is a specialist in R&D, as well as robotics, innovation, and Manufacture 4.0. Alex and I are members of the Future Advisory Board of the Campinas Commercial and Industrial Association. So hello, Alex, and welcome back to Talk to Brazil, the business connection.
Good morning, Tom. Thank you very much for having me again.
It's always a pleasure. And on the last program, we talked about Brazil business. We talked about automation, autonomy, technology, innovation, robotics. And you mentioned you're on your way to Pittsburgh, and you said Pittsburgh is a hub. What is happening there now, and is it still growing as a hub for robotics and autonomy?
Tom, yes. In fact, more than being on my way, I relocated to Pittsburgh. When I thought, where would I want to be in the U.S., in the way of being in the middle of where the action is happening, Pittsburgh really came up number one. Not only because of a strong network, but also because of the number of companies that are pouring hundreds of millions and even billions of dollars in automation, robotics, and digitalization. So this is a city where, first of all, you see neighborhoods that used to be poor and run down. I'm thinking of Lawrenceville. I'm thinking of East Liberty. Today, these are some of the most growing, happening, beautiful, even renovated neighborhoods.
Right.
And that is because, some of the key companies that are working in, for example, car autonomy, and I'm thinking of Aptiv, Argo AI, Aurora, Uber, they have, put most of their operations in Pittsburgh, not just because driving in Pittsburgh is quite challenging, but much more because of the talent pool that is coming out of the local universities including Carnegie Mellon University.
So you are in the place. And for our listeners, just to be, let everyone know, I was born in Pittsburgh. I lived most of my younger life in Pittsburgh. And as you just mentioned, Alex, I have gone through and lived part of the transformation of the city from the Steel City, which it is still known as the Steel City, but as a transformation from an industrial city to a service city and to a technology city. And that's been striking. It's one of the cities in the United States that has been able to renovate itself and apply innovation to itself. And it has, over the years, and still is from my point of view, it's considered one of the cities with the highest quality of life. So, and it's a friendly city. Pittsburgh is a friendly place to be.
That's right, Tom. And I am enjoying very much, even though today things are a bit down because of the pandemic. And yesterday I went out to have a couple drinks with an old friend to reacquaint myself, only to find out that the authorities had again restricted the sale of alcohol in the bars because of the new number or a recent surge in the number of cases of infected people. So, but besides that, which I consider something that will pass, you see a number of new buildings, and it's not just companies working in robotic and automation. Here we have also many companies that are targeting the developments in artificial intelligence, machine learning, human-computer interaction. So we have Apple, we have Facebook, we have Google, And where they have set their offices, you can see the improvement of the quality of life of people around in those neighborhoods.
Right.
Many more restaurants, many more interaction.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is just fascinating how the innovation is not only bringing a change for the good in everyone who's going to be using those innovations, whatever they are, but also to the people in the city.
Yeah, so you feel welcome, you feel at home there, huh?
Oh, yeah, very much so. Very much so, yes.
Now, Alex, we talked when we were together, and even before the last time we talked on Talk to Brazil, we met personally here in Campinas. We had lunch together, and this was all before the pandemic. But in that discussion, we talked quite a lot about robotics and about autonomy and about what was happening at that time. What I've seen since our discussions, and part because of the pandemics, has been a surge in new technology, a surge in looking towards technology as a solution. And I shared with you a video that I had seen about robotics applied to hotels. And it showed a really touchless hotel, I think, in China. And everything was done either through touch technology, the cleaning, the opening of the doors, the service in the restaurant was through a robot. But what that made me think, obviously the robots are there, they're here, they're working, there are companies making them. But looking towards the future, that opens up, to me, it opens up a whole new avenue of possibilities from a business standpoint and also from a professional standpoint. I remember when drones first came out, drones were sort of a high-tech toy. But even here in Brazil, how many companies have started applying and using drones, creating new companies, creating new professions, and applying that? Do you see that same thing happening with robots? Because most people think of a robot as a big armed thing in a factory putting pieces together, but it's much more friendly than that, isn't it?
Yes. And before I answer that question, I wanted to just highlight that when you sent me that video, I was just going through the experience of being in a well-known chain that I will leave unnamed in the Quad Cities because I had a weekend trip to pick up a few belongings and bring them back to Pittsburgh. Mm-hmm. The lines in front of the front desk, you could say that the employee taking care of the guests was really tired, and therefore her mood was not the best.
Right.
The service also was lacking in different aspects of the room, and that just brought to me a striking difference compared to the video, where you saw technologies that would allow people to do self-check-in, to have self-service to procure items, where most things were just speeded and were much easier to accomplish,
right,
because you didn't have to stand in line. Mm-hmm. In any case, I just want to say that shows that these technologies like robotics and things like facial recognition and others will ease significantly, because you will not be depending or on having the attention of a very scarce resource, which is engaged, kind employees. Right?
That's true.
Yep. So I think that, more and more good service is going to come, the basics by technology and robots, but there will always be that part that is, the kindness and the attention that only humans can give. But those people are becoming scarcer, therefore these bottlenecks. Back to your question, I would like to, so I strongly agree with you, and I think that robotics is becoming much, much more a technology that is its time has come. Mm-hmm. And of course, you can say, well, that has been said every decade, right, in the past 5 decades. But let me tell you why I think that there are two factors that explain why the adoption of robotics is accelerating. The first one is a trend that has been happening the last couple decades. Another one is very much the pandemic today. Mm-hmm. The first trend is digitalization. Right. I remember that when I would talk to venture investors 20 years ago to talk about, investing in a robotic startup, they would look at me with very little interest. And that's because at the time they were investing in the digital companies, the Amazons, the Googles, and those that today have established themselves. Right. That's where they saw the money. And they were right, because at the time, many of the robotics efforts were really pushing technology. There was no market pull. Right. But over this last couple of decades, all these different industries have seen an increasing level of digitalization, and therefore now they have data. They have data, and with analytics, they know where the bottlenecks are, where the challenges are, where the quality problems are, and even where the employee safety risks exist. So now they have real data that justifies financial investments. Mm-hmm. So nowadays, much more than automation and robotics being a technology push, there's a true market pull. And that's why you see adoption in logistics, in distribution centers, the automation of inspection, the automation, and you mentioned drones being one of those tools, right, that extend the human reach to do inspection in a way that was never possible before, mm-hmm. unless you were willing to be hanging from a bridge or just being, trying to climb suppose a windmill, right? All these things that are dangerous for people, now drones can help. So this trend of digitalization has driven into more insight on the business challenges, the business opportunities, and now automation is being pulled in because it can really solve business problems, business challenges. And that's why there's a significant increase in the adoption. And this goes beyond the autonomous cars. Companies here, like, for example, Carnegie Robotics, have made a great partnership with a Finnish floor scrubbing company mm-hmm. to deploy hundreds of floor cleaners. And more recently, there was even in the news that this company was using the same floor cleaners to clean the Pittsburgh airport to make sure that it was free of virus. Right. So there's that is showing that there was a trend asking for the automated solution for floor cleaning, but further acceleration of the adoption because of the pandemic. Right. And that is just one example. Another one that I would mention is Bossa Nova Robotics. They are working to deploy 1,000 robots in more than 300 Walmart stores, making sure that the inventory is in place. So that is an example of inspection. There's no way that you could trust the consistency of the data that tells you that you have all your shelves well stocked. Right. These robots are doing that and giving tremendous additional insights to Walmart into how to better run the business.
Well, that example of Boston Robotics is one that I've seen that just recently they started offering that commercially. And some people say, well, that's too expensive. But that reminded me really of the beginning of drones. And I can see people buying one of those and setting up a company and then subletting their robot or going out and inventing different things, different uses. You don't have to invent the uses are there, but offering that as a service. And I think that's something that's going to pop up very quickly. And even more so, because what you mentioned, the pandemic, the way I see it here in Brazil, it's very clear that the pandemic has drawn a line in the sand of before and after. And what you mentioned about having data, I agree, is most important. But that line in the sand, there are so many companies that do not have data. They don't have it. To try to get it today is almost impossible. And unfortunately, what we're seeing here in Brazil are those companies that weren't digitalized, they didn't pass through the transformation, they really have no way of surviving. But those who do have the data have at least a chance for survival.
That is exactly right. And let me give you an example that is very close to me. business partners in Chile and Brazil and I are working to see how we can create a company that offers robots and rents them, like robot as a service,
right,
to help distribution centers and their logistics. And what we are finding as we look for the companies that can adopt these technologies rapidly are those that already had what is called a warehouse management system or an inventory system. In other words, when a company has invested in the digital platform that allows them to manage the business, then they will be asking for the technologies that can improve their operations, especially to face the pandemic that has brought retail down on their knees and creating a challenge because e-commerce is rising and fulfilling orders that come from e-commerce is a very different challenge than fulfilling retail stocking.
Right.
Because you have a large, very like hundreds or thousands of orders per day of 2, 3, 4 items. And then just putting people in the distribution centers is not enough. In any case, I don't want to extend my talking about that particular opportunity, but that is a very good example that those companies that had already invested in digital tools will find that a much easier transition to automation that is going to give them the profitability and flexibility to be more resilient as businesses in front of pandemics and the cycles, especially the ones that you and I know are very common in Latin America.
Right. But I agree with you. I think the advent before what was called the marketplace will become stronger, and that will be the attractive point because obviously you do need an investment for the technology. And previously it was only the strong survive, but today it will be only the digitalized companies will survive. And if you're too small or just starting, you really need to be part of something different and bigger, really to survive. So, but back to Pittsburgh. So you're really happy to be back there. You see that you feel inspired again.
Yes, absolutely, and very excited because. Again, the trend of digitalization and also the pandemic, both longer, a trend of a couple decades, and now this happening of the last few months, they are coming together to really accelerate a number of technology integration to existing industries. So let me give you an example. This idea of drone package delivery. Had you asked me 6 months ago, I would have said, that's really cool. Sounds great. Who knows when it's going to happen?
Right.
Well, I am observing, and I'm starting to engage myself with this industry. And the specifics of those, Tom, you will find on LinkedIn in the next few weeks, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. But in the meantime, what I can say, though, is that I have been working in attending a number of meetings, online meetings, with the authorities of the FAA, which is the Federal Aviation Administration, also with representatives of the Department of Defense, also groups coming from NASA that also worry and look into the next generation of aviation technologies,
right.
And also private companies or corporations. And my feeling is that there is a determination in the U.S. to craft or change or adapt the regulations and the laws and make this possible. And when you think of, let me just give you a number. So people, when we think of aircraft and helicopters, so the global fleet of running helicopters is about 20,000. Airplanes, like commercial airplanes and military airplanes, maybe is 50,000. But if you think of the number of drones that have been sold, there's a cumulative number that just this Chinese company, DJI, has sold millions of drones.
Right.
So can you imagine the challenge to the existing air traffic control system in the U.S. when you have
in the world,
let's say,
in the world,
That's yes,
here.
yes, you're right. Yes. So just think about, now you had maybe several thousands of aircraft flying at the same time,
right?
And now you're going to have several hundred thousands, if not millions of them,
right?
So that is a challenge that is certainly has a lot of complexity.
Certainly.
But I can tell you that
it really does. It really does.
Yes. But Tom, I am getting myself in the middle of this, and I can tell you that I perceive that there's not just, let's talk about how this could be. It's like, no, how are we going to fix it? What is the reference architecture?
Right.
What are the system? What are the demonstrators? So now it feels to me, and that's why you asked me, are you motivated? I am very motivated because I see that there is a high potential of commercial success for the deployment of drones in many other aspects, where there in many other applications.
All aspects, all applications. I can see that here, and I think the time is right because of what you were just saying. It's going to open up a whole new avenue of new businesses, large, medium, and small. It's certainly opening here. Just talking about the drones. The drones have opened a whole series of new professions. So for persons looking for what am I going to do in the future, there's a whole business around drones. It's assembling, selling, flying, using, analyzing data, creating different solutions. The agricultural area, you talk about drones in Brazil. If you get out into the rural part, they're probably more drones than birds.
Tom, may I give you a very practical example of the value that drones bring to the sugarcane industry in Brazil? Foessel, the largest producer of ethanol and sugar in the world, they are flying drones to map where there are areas in their sugarcane fields, where sugarcane is missing. In other words, you have all these hundreds of thousands of hectares of sugarcane,
right?
And it's bound to find areas where sugarcane is missing because the plant is dead, or because the planting missed an area,
right,
or whatnot. Drones are flying, mapping the crop, and finding where there are areas without sugarcane plant.
Right.
So there is a company not far from where you are in Campinas, a bit north in Paulínia, called AgriSef.
Mm-hmm.
They have technology that can fix those gaps. In other words, can target, in a very target way, plant cane where it's missing. So here you see how the cycle is being closed through, drone inspection,
right,
mapping, right, analytics, and then instructions that go to this very sophisticated implement,
right,
that actually fixes the problem. And then you have a sugarcane field that is more productive and enables an industry that is subject to commodity prices to thrive through more yield.
No, and I've seen that. I've seen other presentations here in agricultural groups. It just amazed me of where we are in Brazil and the application. I think that's the ingenuity. That's the creativity that comes forward once you really understand that the technology works. And I can see that happening right now throughout the world. I can remember we talked about 20 years ago. 20 years ago, we went to the movies and we saw Star Wars, and we thought that was that was a dream. But today, Star Wars is old. Everything that was 20 years ago looked like robots and everything walking around by itself. That's today. So the question is not if is it here, but where do we go from here? What professions? What do we have to learn? If I'm going to go to school, what do I need to do? And if I'm opening a company today that opens has to be a whole different company. It's not the way it used to be.
Right. And you touched into something that is very dear to me, Tom, and that is training and,
right,
and making people able to use these technologies. So I just wanted to share with you that I made some angel investment in a company in Indaiatuba that is working on putting together a marketplace for training, online training, to help farmers, ag equipment operators, and others to have at their disposal very, very broad training content. And this is really in response and a way to help, the distancing that the pandemic is making. But in addition to that, in Brazil, the travel is difficult. And sometimes you find people who are hours away from the closest airport or potentially training center.
Right.
As more and more investments are done in rural connectivity, that there's still much more to do. But nevertheless, we are preempting, but making more and more content available online. Right. Hopefully that is going to make the people, the farmers and their employees ready to adopt and use and realize the value of many of these new technologies.
Just for our listeners, Indaiatuba that Alex mentioned is very close to Campinas, and it's right next door to the largest airport, the Viracopos Airport, in our vicinity. And to help our listeners remember that Brazil is continental. It's the size of the continental United States. And obviously distances, even if you could or could not get there by airplane, education and learning has to be virtual. Online training is needed because even if you can get there by plane, being updated is something that has to happen almost constantly today. You just can't wait to go to school anymore. I'm amazed here on Sunday mornings there's a program called Global Rural. It basically just shows everything about the agriculture, and I'm just amazed at what I see of the diversity of the application of the types of technology throughout the country. And so to be able to one thing is to learn. The other thing is to keep yourself updated. That has to be every day.
True. Fully agree, Tom.
Now, is your platform, it is going to be online. It's going to be open to whom? Who gets on that? Who's going to train themselves? Technicians or people wanting to start a profession?
Well, let's take the example of a combine or tractor operator. Normally, he can get training, of course, through the dealers. Let's say it could be a John Deere dealer or any of the other brands. But sometimes they're far, and sometimes the farm may have different pieces of equipment. In this case, you will have to go and find a program in one dealer and then in another dealer, etc. We're trying to put together training that will be representing that many customers have multiple brands.
Right.
And
which is normal and typical, I guess, right?
Yes, very much so. So the idea is to just have a one-stop shop. So if you are a tractor operator, you can certify yourself for multiple types of equipment.
Right.
If you are a farm manager, you are going to be able to actually even study potentially an agronomic class.
Right.
And the idea is that this is all going to be packaged in a way that is going to be very easy to consume, taking advantage of the most recent learnings and trends in terms of online training with lots of video and with content that can be digested without having to invest a full day. So then people can train similar to these apps. Like I can think of Duolingo, for example, that can help you learn a language in any moment that you have to spare. Then you can just get a few more words.
Well, I can see the combine operator learning while he's inside the combine, because basically when he's in the combine, he's just sitting there.
Exactly. That is exactly right.
Because so I've seen the combines and harvesting, they're GPS controlled, they're all controlled, and the operator just sits there. Obviously he's watching, the dashboard, what have you, but it's not really hands-on operation anymore.
That is correct. There are multiple times when people could be improving their knowledge, as you said just a few minutes ago. And to me, this is a good opportunity to bridge the gap between technology available and the knowledge to use that technology. And, I'm convinced that we can improve the overall performance of the ag business in Brazil just by having more better trained operaters. So that's one of my bets, Tom, and I'm pretty proud of it.
You should be. And that's, I guess, known today as upskilling, right?
Yes.
That's it.
Yes.
Well,
That's
Alex,
it.
I want to thank you. We're coming to the end of our time, but I want to congratulate you again. I'm obviously enthused about Pittsburgh because that's where I was born, but more so knowing you personally, knowing your potential, and you are the right person in the right place at the right time. That's just fascinating. So I want to congratulate you again, congratulate you for the choice of being there and developing and furthering your knowledge and expertise in Pittsburgh and for the world.
Oh, Tom, thank you very much. You're making me blush, but nevertheless, I am very excited. Very, with a lot of energy, and this is a great time to be alive. And let's look forward to the time when some of the effects of this pandemic are going to be behind us. And I think that this is going to testing so many things of our society, right, economy, politics. The only outcome of this is going to be that we're going to be more resilient as a species, and we're going to be closer one to the others.
I think so. And looking forward to being with you again someday, but certainly we will be back to be talking again because there's so much to follow in the evolution of everything you just mentioned today. So there's going to be more topics to talk, okay?
Absolutely. Tom, always excited and happy to talk to you and your listeners.
Thank you. So be well and be successful as you have been, okay?
And the same to you. We have a lot to do in the next decades, Tom, so take care of yourself as well.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank you for sharing your time. You can learn more about Alex Foessel on LinkedIn. And his last name is Foessel. And you can also find more information about him on Talk to Brazil and this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Google Podcast. I'd like to thank you, our audience and sponsor, Focus MI Market Intelligence. Focus MI specializes in market research for the Brazilian agricultural market, and more about them on their site, which is focusmi.com. Visit our site, talktobrazil.com, and find our previous shows of Talk to Brazil. Remember, when you talk to Tom, you talk to Brazil and the world. Goodbye, and thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to Tom Reaoch on Talk to Brazil, the business connector to Brazil.